Cruise back to the streets of Los Angeles in the late 60s and 70s with Adam-12, 1968 to 1975. The classic police drama that gave viewers a realistic look at life on patrol with officers Pete Malloy and Jim Reed. The series not only thrilled audiences with action and authenticity, but also became a beloved TV staple that influenced generations of cop shows to come. But nearly 5 decades later, fans still wonder, what happened to the cast after the badges and squad cars were put away? In 2025, we revisit the stars of Adam-12 to see where their careers and lives have taken them, from lasting legacies in Hollywood to surprising turns off-screen. Martin Milner was born on December 28, 1931, and when Adam-12 premiered in 1968, he stepped into the role of Officer Pete Malloy at age 37, embodying the cool-headed veteran cop who balanced discipline with compassion. To audiences, Malloy was a moral compass, a steadying force whose calm authority carried the show. But behind that image lay a childhood marred by instability, poverty, and the bitter humiliation of watching his father's gambling habits keep the family moving from city to city. Milner's adolescence was scarred by a battle with polio, which left him bedridden and deeply insecure, hiding resentment behind a boyish smile. He clawed his way into acting, but fame on Route 66 typecast him, and his greatest career wound came after Adam-12 ended. He was rejected from serious film projects, dismissed as television safe, an insult he never forgave. On set, he could be cold, at times accused of passive-aggressive power plays with co-stars, and privately, he was rumored to drown frustration in long nights of drinking. His marriage to Judith Bess Jones lasted, but it was far from idyllic. Friends whispered of long separations and his emotional distance, worsened by his obsession with work. The death of his daughter Amy from leukemia devastated him, and insiders said he became withdrawn, haunted, almost unreachable. Attempts to reinvent himself in the 1980s failed, with a humiliating radio career that never drew the respect he craved. By the 1990s, Milner lived quietly, estranged from much of Hollywood, his wealth shockingly modest for a man whose face had once been a weekly fixture in American living rooms. On September 6, 2015, he died of heart failure in Carlsbad at age 83. Leaving behind an estate valued between $500,000 and $1 million, mostly in property and small residuals, a sobering reflection of how quickly television stardom could fade. William Boyett was born on January 3, 1927, and at 41, he became Sergeant MacDonald in Adam-12, the gravelly-voiced superior whose authority anchored the precinct and whose fatherly discipline shaped the younger officers. Audiences saw an unshakable veteran, but Boyett's life was filled with fragility. Raised in Depression-era Akron, Ohio, he grew up in suffocating poverty, mocked relentlessly for a childhood stutter that he learned to conceal by sheer force of will. Acting became both escape and torment. His uniformed roles kept him employed, but trapped him in a cycle of typecasting that ate away at his self-worth. Off-screen, colleagues respected his reliability, but there were whispers of bitterness and sharp temper, particularly when he was passed over for roles he believed he deserved. His deepest humiliation came in the late 1960s, when he lost a coveted part in a high-profile crime drama, rejected as too television, a label that would haunt him for decades. Personal life was no sanctuary. Though his marriage endured, his struggles with alcohol in the 1970s bred tension at home, and one child reportedly severed ties, accusing him of being emotionally absent. Boyett nursed old wounds in silence, watching younger actors achieve fame while he settled for small roles that reinforced his image as a cop for hire. By the 1990s, his health was failing, plagued by kidney disease and pneumonia, forcing him into obscurity. On December 29, 2004, at 77, he died in Mission Hills, California, from complications of pneumonia and kidney failure, leaving behind an estate valued between $300,000 and $600,000. Though remembered as a rock-solid sergeant, his life was shaped by rejection, typecasting, and a quiet grief that fame never soothed. His modest fortune underscoring the cruel reality of a career spent always in uniform, but never truly free. Art Gilmore, born March 18, 1912, was 56 when he joined Adam-12 as Lieutenant Moore, the authoritative officer whose calm yet commanding presence mirrored the man himself. Moore's character projected integrity, discipline, and the kind of gravitas that reassured both his fictional subordinates and the real audience watching at home. Gilmore's life was built on that voice, deep, resonant, instantly recognizable, one that had narrated countless film trailers, newsreels, and commercials, etching him into the subconscious of America. But behind the polished professionalism, his childhood in Tacoma, Washington, was marked by hardship, as the family struggled to make ends meet during the Great Depression. Art carried scars of scarcity that made him obsessive about work, taking on endless gigs, which sometimes left colleagues whispering he was more machine than man. Though his career seemed pristine, rival announcers accused him of monopolizing opportunities through union politics, as Gilmore eventually rose to president of the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, wielding influence that critics claimed edged out competitors. His personal life was stable, but not without whispers of extramarital flirtations during his long marriage. Stories never confirmed, but circulated in industry gossip. His biggest professional disappointment came when Hollywood shifted toward younger, edgier voices in the 1970s, leaving Gilmore's classic tone dismissed as outdated, a rejection that wounded his pride. He bore tragedies quietly, losing close friends to illness, and endured his own declining health with stoicism. Art Gilmore died of natural causes on September 25, 2010, at 98 in Irvine, California, leaving behind an estate valued around $1 million, built from a lifetime of relentless narration work. Though his wealth was modest compared to his omnipresence, his influence lingers in every trailer and broadcast that shaped mid-century America's sense of authority. Jack Hogan, born November 24, 1929, took on Adam-12 in 1968 at age 39, portraying Sergeant Jerry Miller, a dry-witted, no-nonsense supervisor whose militaristic efficiency carried a sense of calm authority. Viewers respected Miller as the stern yet reliable figure steering young officers, but Hogan himself lived in a world far more fractured than his on-screen persona. Growing up in Chapel Hill during the Depression, Hogan knew hunger, hand-me-down clothes, and the sting of being the skinny boy others taunted. The Army briefly gave him direction, but Hollywood lured him in with promises it rarely kept. Though his role as Kirby in Combat made him a recognizable face, Hogan spent much of his career clawing for relevance, and many directors quietly labeled him difficult for his rigid perfectionism and cutting remarks. The darkest turn came during his marriage to actress Joyce Nisery, which collapsed in a storm of arguments, accusations of infidelity, and bitter court proceedings, staining his reputation as a dependable family man. Later, his career stumbled when producers froze him out after a heated feud with a casting executive, a blow that forced him to reinvent himself behind the camera. While his shift to casting work on Magnum PI salvaged his livelihood, insiders whispered that he manipulated actors during auditions, favoring friends and punishing rivals. Hogan's life mellowed with age, but his health declined, and he lived quietly away from the spotlight. He died on December 6, 2023, in Honolulu at age 94, leaving a fortune estimated between $1.5 and $1.5 billion, $5 million, largely from television royalties and smart investments. It was a comfortable ending for a man who, behind the stoic mask of Sergeant Miller, had fought through betrayal, divorce, and Hollywood's cold shoulders to carve out his own peculiar niche. Jed Allen, born March 1, 1935, played Reno West in Adam-12 in 1970 at the age of 35. A cunning burglar whose peculiar moral code of take a little, leave a little, made him more than just a villain. He was a charming rogue audiences oddly rooted for, and Allen delivered him with a dangerous charisma that unsettled even while it entertained. Reno was a small role, but it hinted at Allen's natural magnetism that would later make him a daytime television fixture. Off-screen, however, Allen carried scars from a troubled New York childhood where his father abandoned the family, leaving him to grow up in poverty, with a mother stretched thin, mocked by peers for his speech impediment and the second-hand clothes he wore, humiliations that hardened him into a man determined to control every room he entered. His rise through soaps like Days of Our Lives and Santa Barbara gave him adoring fans, yet the path was punctured by brutal failures, including an abrupt firing in the early 1980s that devastated him and sent him into heavy drinking, raging against producers he accused of betrayal. Rumors swirled that Allen often used his authority to belittle younger actors, and industry gossip linked him to affairs during his marriage that strained family bonds. His biggest professional heartbreak came not from a single role, but from being repeatedly written out of shows in ways that suggested he had made too many enemies in the executive suites. At home, while he publicly celebrated his 3 sons, insiders whispered about conflicts, financial lawsuits over unpaid management fees, and his difficulty staying emotionally present. When his longtime partner Terry died suddenly, Allen was crushed, spiraling into reclusion and depression. By the time of his own death on March 9, 2019, at 84, he had become a fading figure, remembered fondly but quietly, his estate valued between $3 and $5 million. Impressive, yet also diminished by hidden debts and lost opportunities, leaving a legacy that blended warmth with bitterness, a career of both triumphs and betrayals. James McEachin, born May 20, 1930, was 38 when he portrayed Freddie Rivers in Adam-12 in 1968, a role that stood out because Freddie was dignified, steady, and portrayed as a rare moral compass in a show often filled with chaos, giving audiences a figure of calm authority they respected. Yet McEachin's calm exterior on screen hid a past that was anything but tranquil. He grew up in the segregated poverty of Rennert, North Carolina, ridiculed for his quiet, bookish nature, and living with the constant sting of racism, forcing him to bury anger and pain that would follow him for decades. Drafted into the Korean War, he survived an ambush that nearly killed him, carrying shrapnel wounds and the invisible burden of trauma long after returning home. His entry into Hollywood was fueled by discipline and intensity, but those same qualities became liabilities as he clashed with producers over stereotypical roles, his refusal to play demeaning caricatures costing him steady work and quietly landing him on the blacklist of certain studios. He endured humiliations such as pilots that were scrapped after months of work and film projects abandoned without explanation, leaving him scraping by between acting jobs and writing gigs. The darkest blow came when publishers initially rejected his novels with the blunt claim that black authors could not sell to mainstream readers, an insult that devastated him but also drove his determination to prove them wrong. His personal life was equally fraught. An early marriage collapsed in acrimony. Estranged children accused him of being emotionally absent, and friends said his stern demeanor masked deep loneliness. In later years, MacEachin fought health issues linked to his wartime injuries, and the deaths of fellow veterans he had bonded with over trauma weighed heavily on him. Still, he rebuilt himself as a novelist and speaker, earning admiration, though never riches. He died on January 11, 2025, at 94, his estate valued at a modest $1 to $2 million, an amount that belied the weight of his contributions to both entertainment and military history, leaving behind a story of survival marked as much by rejection as by resilience. Robert Donner, born April 27, 1931, was 37 when he first appeared in Adam-12 as TJ, an ex-convict turned informant whose jittery eccentricity made him unpredictable yet oddly sympathetic. A performance that resonated because Donner blurred the line between menace and comedy. He brought to life a character viewers weren't sure whether to fear or pity, echoing the quirky persona he later perfected as Exidor in Mork and Mindy. Behind this oddball charm, Donner's upbringing in a struggling New York family left him with lifelong insecurities. Mocked for his awkward looks and eccentric mannerisms, he learned to weaponize them into performance. Yet the pain of childhood ridicule never left him. His career spanned decades, but it was riddled with humiliations. Typecast as lunatics, criminals, or outsiders, Donner often endured casting directors openly laughing at his auditions. Industry gossip painted him as both prankster and hothead, a man who could light up a room with jokes but explode into tantrums if ignored. And this volatility closed doors that might have led to bigger roles. His biggest professional disaster was the aborted attempt to headline his own sitcom in the 1980s, a project canceled before it aired after brutal reviews of the pilot, a failure that scarred his reputation and ensured he would remain in supporting roles. In his personal life, his marriage seemed stable, but insiders whispered of long periods of estrangement and gambling habits that drained savings and forced him into relentless guest spots to pay bills. As the 1990s came, health problems and the deaths of close friends deepened his depression, though he masked it with humor. Donner died of a heart attack on June 8, 2006, at the age of 75, leaving an estate worth $1 to $2 million. Respectable but far below what he might have earned had Hollywood embraced him beyond oddballs and ex-cons. His legacy remains that of a scene stealer who made eccentricity unforgettable. Yet his story is also one of thwarted ambition, hidden anger, and the crushing reality of an industry that chews up men who don't fit the mold. William Elliott, born June 4, 1934, entered Adam-12 in 1971 at 37 as Officer Gus Grant, a confident, street-smart cop whose jazzy rhythm and relaxed swagger reflected his other life as a professional drummer, a role that gave the show fresh texture and made him a brief standout. Off-screen, Elliott carried scars from a Baltimore upbringing marred by instability, the absence of a strong father figure, and the constant pressure to overcome poverty with charm and bravado, learning early to use charisma as armor. His Hollywood path was restless. He had turned down MIT to pursue music, a decision that alienated family and haunted him when his acting career stalled. Though initially magnetic, Elliott's career crumbled under the weight of poor choices and reckless behavior. Colleagues described him as volatile, moody, and difficult to trust. A man who could electrify a room one night and destroy a relationship the next. His greatest failure came with a leading role in a blaxploitation film that critics shredded and audiences ignored, a flop so severe it branded him unreliable and nearly erased him from Hollywood opportunities. His personal life was even more chaotic. He married and divorced singer Dionne Warwick twice, with both unions marked by explosive fights, accusations of infidelity, and financial battles that spilled into courtrooms and tabloids. Elliot's womanizing reputation was legendary, whispered about at parties where he charmed women effortlessly and enraged rivals with his arrogance, and his lifestyle of heavy drinking and unstable spending further deepened the cracks in his career. By the early 1980s, his finances were crumbling, and his health faltered under stress, with friends noting he looked older than his years. Cancer cut him down on September 30, 1983, in Los Angeles at just 49, leaving behind a modest estate of $500,000 to $1 million, overshadowed by debts and the turbulence of his divorces. His legacy became that of a man who could have been a leading black star, but instead burned himself out with charm, ego, and self-sabotage, leaving Warwick's fame to eclipse his own in the public memory. Gary Crosby, born June 27, 1933, played Officer Ed Wells in 1968 at the age of 35, and his on-screen swagger mirrored a life soaked in rebellion and contradiction. Ed Wells was cocky, sarcastic, always bending rules, but somehow earning his colleagues' trust. And Gary lent the role an edge that made the character both infuriating and magnetic. Yet beneath the uniform was the son of Bing Crosby, a man raised in a gilded cage that was more prison than paradise. Gary's childhood was marked by beatings, humiliation, and a cold father who demanded perfection but delivered cruelty. He exposed these dark family secrets in his explosive memoir, Going My Own Way, which detonated Hollywood's image of the perfect Crosby clan and left him estranged from siblings and industry allies. His own career oscillated between bursts of promise and crushing failures. He was musically gifted, but forever dismissed as a lesser shadow of his legendary father. He drowned his insecurities in alcohol, gaining a reputation as volatile, unreliable, and often too drunk to perform. Marriages collapsed in messy divorces. Lovers accused him of cruelty and neglect, and his compulsive gambling drained fortunes as quickly as he earned them. His lowest point came when club owners blacklisted him after repeated drunken outbursts on stage, a humiliation that nearly ended his career. Though he clawed back with steady TV work, he never escaped the ghost of Bing's shadow or the self-destructive patterns of addiction. Gary Crosby died of lung cancer on August 24, 1995, at 62 in Burbank, California. His estate, swollen by inheritance but scarred by squandered wealth, was valued at $14 million, an ironic reminder that even immense fortune cannot erase the torment of a childhood and career lived under the weight of a father's cruelty. Robert Patton, born October 11, 1925, appeared in Adam-12 in 1969 at age 43 as Detective Sergeant Stone, a man of order and method who gave the show a veneer of real police grit. Fans remembered Stone for his strict demeanor and sharp insight, a figure who balanced authority with an unsettling undercurrent of tension. Off-screen, Patton's life was riddled with contradictions. He had grown up in Tacoma, in a household strained by financial instability, a boy mocked for his bookish looks and quiet manner, masking his anger behind silence. Hollywood promised escape, but it became a punishing ride. Patton was constantly sidelined as second tier, never quite breaking through to leading man status. His biggest scandal erupted in 1962, when he was named in actress Glynis Johns' explosive divorce case, accused of adultery. a humiliation that tarnished his reputation and left him fighting whispers of betrayal for years. Known on set for his sharp tongue and impatience, Patton often clashed with directors who described him as charming one day, poisonous the next. The most devastating blow of his career came when he was abruptly dropped from a high-profile film after executives deemed him too controversial, a coded punishment for his involvement in the Johns scandal. His personal life was hardly stable. Multiple marriages soured, friends drifted, and whispers of affairs lingered like smoke. Illness haunted his later years as cancer quietly consumed him. He died on December 29, 2001, in Los Angeles at 76, leaving behind an estate valued between $500,000 and $1 million, mostly in property and residuals. Though comfortable by ordinary standards, it was a modest sum for a man whose name once buzzed in Hollywood scandal sheets, leaving behind a legacy of talent shadowed by whispers and unfinished ambitions. Kenneth Washington, born October 19, 1936, entered Adam-12 in 1968 at age 32 as Officer Miller, one of the few African-American policemen on primetime TV. His character radiated dignity, quiet intelligence, and a calm defiance of stereotypes, offering viewers a rare glimpse of a black officer portrayed without mockery. Washington, however, carried the bruises of a boyhood spent in Mississippi, where poverty and racial hostility cut deep. Classmates mocked him mercilessly, and he learned early to swallow his rage. Hollywood opened doors but slammed them shut just as fast. Though he broke barriers on Hogan's Heroes and Star Trek, he was often typecast and denied opportunities given freely to white counterparts. He endured being called unmarketable by studios, a subtle way of excluding him. The lowest blow came when a planned spin-off starring him was abruptly scrapped, leaving him devastated and convinced racial bias had cost him his shot at stardom. On set, he earned respect, but also a reputation for simmering impatience when faced with patronizing attitudes, and colleagues sometimes whispered about his sharp temper. His personal life saw turbulence. 2 marriages ended in bitterness, and though he fathered 3 children, his career struggles strained his relationships, leaving stretches of estrangement. Washington carried private grief, the loss of close friends to drugs and violence, and the gnawing sense that Hollywood never truly accepted him. In later years, he found stability in Beverly Hills, but illness and age wore him down. He died on July 18, 2025, at 88, in Beverly Hills, leaving behind a modest estate of around $1 million, mostly in savings and union benefits. Though not vast, his wealth represented survival against a system that fought him at every turn, and his true legacy lies in the roles that shattered barriers even as they left him scarred. Don Ross, born October 6, 1946, appeared on Adam-12 in 1971, at just 25, as Investigator Kincaid, projecting muscular authority and intensity that made his presence impossible to ignore, a persona closely tied to his real-life career as wrestler and bodybuilder Ripper Savage. On screen, Kincaid was the embodiment of raw power, yet off-screen, Ross's life was marked by volatility and recklessness that often blurred into self-destruction. Raised in Detroit amid poverty and derision, Ross found solace in bodybuilding as a way to shield himself from mockery, transforming humiliation into muscle and aggression. But this armor became both his identity and his prison. His Hollywood career was niche and unstable. Casting directors saw him as a brute, not an actor, and his attempts at mainstream roles fizzled. He courted infamy with outrageous stunts, including biting the head off a Hulk Hogan action figure on live television Antics that gave him notoriety, but branded him a sideshow rather than a serious performer. Wrestling promoters whispered of steroid rages, backstage fights, and sabotage, and his greatest career collapse came during a national tour where his violent behavior caused promoters to cancel shows and blacklist him, effectively ending his chance at wrestling superstardom. His personal life was equally turbulent. Relationships burned out quickly, children became estranged, and his volatility made lasting bonds nearly impossible. By the 1990s, years of steroid use, reckless training, and financial missteps left him struggling, surviving on small appearances, desperate to hold on to a fading legacy. On June 2, 1995, at just 48, Ross died of a massive heart attack in Detroit, his arteries almost completely blocked, his sculpted body betraying him in the end. His net worth was under $300,000, a fraction of what his fame might have earned had he stayed in control. And while mainstream audiences barely remember him, in bodybuilding circles he remains a cautionary legend, a symbol of muscle built on pain, notoriety purchased with chaos, and a life consumed by intensity until it burned itself out. Kent McCord, born on September 26, 1942, was just 26 when he debuted as Officer Jim Reed in 1968, playing the rookie partner to Milner's Malloy, an eager and idealistic figure who represented the innocence of youth colliding with the hard realities of police work. Audiences adored his boyish charm and unwavering morality, but McCord's life was layered with shadows. Raised in Los Angeles, he endured a rigid, joyless childhood under a disciplinarian father whose cruelty left lasting scars, making young Kent retreat into a mask of politeness. His early days in Hollywood saw him orbit Elvis Presley and Ricky Nelson, but beneath the glamour, he felt reduced to a hanger-on, often mocked as a pretty face with little talent. Though his Adam-12 fame cemented him as a household name, insiders spoke of a controlling streak. He fought behind the scenes for larger storylines and resented writers who gave Milner more gravitas. His greatest career humiliation came in the 1980s, when his attempts to transition to film collapsed, branded a television actor only, a stigma that cost him his shot at leading man status. His marriage to Cynthia Lee Doty endured, but not without storms. Rumors swirled of separations, shouting matches over finances during lean years, and his authoritarian parenting style reportedly drove one child to distance himself. Professionally, he was shunned by certain producers for being rigid and difficult to negotiate with, a whisper campaign that made roles scarce. Though never plagued by drugs or infidelity, he lived with the quieter demons of resentment and unfulfilled ambition. Now 82, McCord lives in Los Angeles with an estimated $1.3 million in assets, sustained by residuals and pensions rather than Hollywood deals, his wealth modest compared to peers. Once the fresh-faced rookie, he is now remembered as a man who clung fiercely to his badge, while privately battling bitterness, control, and the ache of a career that promised more than it ever delivered. Thank you for joining us on this nostalgic journey through classic television history. If you enjoyed learning about the cast of Adam-12 and where they are now, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more vintage Hollywood retrospectives, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your memories and suggestions, so let us know which TV show or movie cast you'd like us to feature next.